Welcome to the program. I'm Marty Shenkman, joined by my partner in monthly crime, Alan Gassman. We This is the second installment of what we're hoping to keep. And Alan, you have to keep us on track. It's your responsibility, not mine, to do a monthly webinar. And the idea was to keep something informal, but there's always different interesting issues that come up in practice for all of us. And by the way, email Alan or I and tell us things that you find of interest that are coming up, and we'll either talk about it, or if you want to get on the next monthly and talk about it with us, we're happy to share it. We're just trying to use this as an opportunity rather than a formal PowerPoint webinar on a specific topic that you race through all the PowerPoints, to have something more conversational, very practical, because it's all based on things we're seeing in practice. Alan, you want to start? We'll start with some AI ideas.
Sure.
So
Where do you,
Alan and I seem to feel, and maybe we've drank in the wrong Kool-Aid, but we seem to feel that AI is not going to transform practice. It is transforming our practices. A lot of the colleagues we talk to have not drank in the Kool-Aid. They're not on the train. A lot of them don't want to get on the train, and I get it. It's always uncomfortable delving into things that are so new and different and unusual. It's kind of, though, there's a very famous saying, there's no growth in the comfort zone and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So you kind of have to jump in and hold your nose and start tinkering with AI. I'm going to talk about just a couple of things that I've been using AI for, just a couple of these yesterday, that I never realized these applications. And I feel, and Alan, I know, is very involved with his estate view software, which is a much more formal approach. But I feel that if we can present little practical steps that you can start getting your feet wet with what AI can do, you'll start to realize the power of it. And what is also so amazing, whatever we can do with AI today, if it doesn't work really well, and we've had some things that don't work, so we try them and then we discard them. In 6 months, a year from now, whatever may not work well today may be like, a rocket ship in a year or less. So keep that in mind. So here's something that happened yesterday. And Alan, I know this has never happened to you. I had a client actually complain about a bill. So I know you're not familiar with that thought, so I will explain. The client emailed me and said, "How could you charge me X dollars for reviewing a gift tax return?" And I pondered for a minute and said, "There's no way I charge this guy X dollars." So what I did, I went into our billing system and I generated a bill, of just a listing of all time spent since August 1. I just kind of picked a date going way back, and which was long before the gift tax return review process was started. I imported into AI. We use Copilot, and we're going to, based on your guidance, Alan, we're going to get another one. I have to ask you which other one, Claude or whatever you recommend. But I inputted the time run, which took a minute to do, literally a minute, into AI and said, "Hey, what I'd like you to do is analyze the attached time run and tell me how much time was spent on reviewing a gift tax return and how much time was spent on other tasks." Bam, 30 seconds, less. I get back an analysis of the bill, and the billing analysis told me that we spent X dollars reviewing the gift tax return, Y dollars on another project for the client that had nothing to do with the gift tax return. And it even told me how much time we didn't bill the client for, because it gleaned that out. And it told me a whole bunch of other things. So within 15 minutes, I emailed the client, "I'm sorry, you said we had spent 5X on reviewing the gift tax return. It was only X. And here's exactly all the categories of work we did for you since August 1 of last year until today." Bam, done. Now, in the past, what I used to do is I would have an admin print out the time run. I would sit down with the time run, and forgive me, but I always like different colored pens. And you can still do that in electronically with color coding. Um, and I would write down MTG for meeting, M for memo, T for telephone call, et cetera, et cetera. I'd write down the topics and I'd hand it back to an admin, and they'd go back with their calculator and add it all up and massage it and work on it. It was a whole project. This thing took literally 10, 15 minutes of my time. I had a much more detailed, much more exact analysis and all sorts of other information. So when a client wants a billing analysis, now sometimes we have things broken out by matter, so it's automatic. But when you're working on a general project and a client feels you charge too much for something or wants to know what something may have cost, boom, you got it. It's also intriguing from a management standpoint because we can now evaluate what we do on different matters using AI. Alan?
Every day, there's something new that we are doing with AI, and it's saving a lot of time, and it's really stimulating too, because you get so much more data. Like when you did your bill analysis,
Right.
you got a lot more data. So I had a call this morning when I was on the treadmill on my cell phone from a client who's a friend, and his dog but bit somebody. So we talked for 15 minutes, and I went to Estate View and I used Claude Pro, and I asked Claude Pro
Claude Pro is an AI
the best.
provider.
Yeah, Claude Sonnet. We call it Pro, but it's Claude Sonnet. The best. It's a good Claude. Claude's really really bright. It's my favorite right now. Perplexity is also very good. Grok's very good. They're all really good. But anyway, within 12 minutes, four interactions, I had a list of 6 AV rated defense only lawyers within his zip code, Pennsylvania. I had their bios, and then I had a really eloquent letter to him about insurance defense and whether he needed a coverage expert, what to say, what not to say, what he had to report to the governmental authorities in his city because of a dog bite. I mean, it was beautiful. And then I had Gemini review it. Gemini corrected like 6 things.
Alan, just in case someone's not aware, Gemini is another company that has an AI
Oh yeah,
platform.
right. Anthropic makes Claude and Google makes Gemini. Eventually, Gemini is probably going to be the best because Google is spending gobs of money and has a lot of users. But anyway, 20 minutes after the call, I had a 9-page letter to him. And I was really pleased with the outcome of the letter. And I emailed and I said, "Hey, John, don't rely on this letter, but take it to your defense lawyer, and it's probably 95% accurate." And of course, the letter said, "Don't talk to anyone about this dog bite. Don't say anything." But I mean, it was just it allowed me to give him so much great service so quickly in a way that I enjoyed interacting with it. That it's really it's enhanced my enjoyment of the practice and the productivity. And I'm very, very candid with the client. I say, "Dear John, this letter was written by AI. I helped a little here and there. It may not all be accurate, but I didn't want to wait a week to get you a letter. Put it on screen and let me know your questions, comments, and suggestions. If you want me to complete this letter about your estate plan, I will. Otherwise, it can just serve as my meeting notes. Up to you. I may complete the letter next week. I may not. Have a great day." I can get that now to a client the day that we met or the day after we met. Much more enjoyable for me and much better for the client. And then there's 20 pages of all these checklists that I may never look at, but there may be just something on that checklist I didn't think about.
Alan, just to clarify, because again, you're like
Yeah, I'm sorry.
you're already getting comfortable with this, and a lot of our colleagues aren't. When you say letter, the letter was written by AI.
Right.
And
The
when you say checklist, did you ask AI to generate checklists?
What I do after every client meeting is I sit down with one of my secretaries and I either tell the secretary everything that was said in the meeting or I write a letter to the client that the secretary is listening to. So the secretary can ask me questions and they're going to handle a lot of the work on the situation. We take the transcript of exactly what I said and put it into AI. And during the conversation, I'll say, "Oh, I meant to mention that they also have a tree in their backyard. Move that up to towards the beginning where we were talking about the vegetation." And uh, their daughter's moving to Baltimore give me a little summary of Baltimore healthcare powers of attorney because the daughter has health issues, and put that in the letter as if it's coming from me. Uh, then I just lay out the whole thing that I discussed with the client. The transcript goes into AI. AI writes the letter. AI writes a reminder letter. AI writes a memo of everything that it looked for. For example, if I said, I found 3 AV rated lawyers near your uh, zip code using AI who specialize in family law. Here they are. I just tell AI to do that. AI does it. Then AI gives me a memo that says, Alan, double check. You told me to find 3 AV rated lawyers in the zip code area. Here's how I found it. Here's their websites. Make sure you double check it. And then I hand that to a law clerk, or I hand that to one of our lawyers, or even sometimes a secretary. Check this out. Was it right? But in the meantime, I just send it to the client and say, this was largely written by AI. Don't rely on it yet, but let me know your thoughts. Because
Let me,
when you
Ellen, I'm going to interrupt because you've said this several times, and I want to make sure everybody gets it. What you just said is vitally, vitally important. We can take something from AI, and I know people are kind of, let's say, wary because there was a case, Matia, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, where a lawyer had AI write a brief or at least do the research, and the citations were to fictitious cases, and the court slammed them. So people are worried, but that's what gets the headlines. But what you've just said, I think, is really important, and it's something we've been very careful with. When we generate something from AI, we put, just like you said, exactly what you do, we do. We let the client know this was generated by AI. I just did a presentation where I had a lot of statistical analysis. It was generated by AI. I spent hours doing it. I didn't want to spend another 10 hours, you know, fact checking all the sources. And I didn't think it was necessary because I was looking for the big picture point. But I said, this information has been generated by AI and not fact checked. And that's really important to protect the practitioner. Now, certain things you're doing, you're going to have to fact check to the nth degree. But sometimes, and that's kind of what Alan is describing, is certain things you can get clients pretty good information. You kind of know it smells right. And you know the client doesn't want to spend X dollars more for you to go to the nth degree. And for whatever the particular use is, it may not matter. So it's not a one answer fits all. Yeah, some things if you're putting a brief together or a law review article, you want to know you checked every citation, every case, and made sure it's right. Hallucinations do happen. I was writing something about the Roland case, which was a well-known case that happened last year about portability, and they didn't file the return right. And I just wanted the citation for Roland, so I asked AI, please find the citation of the Roland case, which dealt with portability, and it gave me something that was turned out to be a fictitious case. It was bizarre, but I knew it was fictitious because I had seen the site and I went back and got it. So you do have to be careful, but you don't have to. And there's another well-known phrase, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Sometimes good suffices, but disclose that it's AI and use judgment, which is something our prospective clients, when they use AI, don't seem to have, but use judgment to discern how and when you apply it. So I just wanted to emphasize you made some really important points that I think may have just flown by people, but I think they're critical to the use of AI and the discomfort that some people feel with it.
right, and we're going to have to change. I have to change habits. I'm changing habits. I have to read every sentence of everything I do. It used to be I would dictate it. A very intelligent secretary would make sure the grammar was right and would fix my meaning. But with I don't have to wait a day and a half for her to type it. It comes out actually better than she would have done it, but I do have to read every sentence. And I do. Still fast. Still
Let,
bad.
let, let me comment on that. So what we do, which is a little different than what you do, but conceptually the same, um, we record every meeting with permission. Let me retract that statement. We record most meetings selectively. Sometimes, people we just don't, but we record most meetings. And then I get the transcript out of Zoom, which takes a nanosecond. You get an email saying your recording's ready. You pull down the transcript, you save it, you upload it into um, AI, and you say, give me a summary of the meeting. And now, Alan, again, you're so used to this that I think you're saying things like that people may not focus on they should. So when you give AI prompts, you have to say when you're giving it instructions, please write a letter to an intelligent, sophisticated estate planning client. I don't want a letter written to the average American, which may be, I don't know, a 12th grade education. I don't know what the level of reading is, but I want it for a sophisticated estate planning client. So AI knows the voice and the level to do it. I want a very detailed and thorough memo covering all points because otherwise it glosses over and only gets, and maybe this is actually a good thing, the highlights. But AI will generate a letter, it can generate a memo of the meeting, it can generate all sorts of things. And at the end of what it generates that you asked for, it knows to tell you, hey, you didn't ask for a checklist of action steps or follow up research on this. Would you like it? The prompts are really interesting. So it generates it. Now, one of the things that I've done is, and so far it's 100%, I've asked clients, listen, I have AI going to generate a meeting memo. I will review everything. I'm not sending it out, so I am going to spend time on it. But instead of me spending, for argument's sake, 3 hours, it may be an hour and a half. It's going to cut my time in half and cut the time in which I can get this to you by weeks. It won't have the same format and language and tone if I wrote it from scratch. Are you okay with that? So the first client that I did this on, his name was Rich, and it was maybe a couple months ago. He said, let me get this straight. You're going to bill me half the amount of time and the language, and there'll be some repetition and the language won't be quite your style, but I can save half the cost. Yes, do it. The tone is not going to be what any of you like, but you're not probably not going to find a client that cares about the tone and the formatting when they can get it done much quicker and for a lot less money. And it's pretty good, but you do have to, I'm going to repeat again what you said, Ellen, because you keep saying all these like little nuggets, but quickly, you got to read every sentence for accuracy, not necessarily retype it. So let
Well,
me, are we good? I know I kind of cut you off, but you said like a lot of important things. I just don't want people to get put off by because, oh, this is daunting or this is different. Yeah, it's different, but jump in. The water's good.
right. So during your meeting, Marty, I assume you say things like, I'm going to ask the AI to give me some cases on and statutes and tell me what the legal situation is when ABC happens to someone in this situation. And then AI will take that cue and do it while it prepares your summary memo.
So what Alan is saying, I said a minute ago, and let me give you a practical idea of what we do. And Alan, you may have a better idea. We haven't talked about this ahead of time. So you have to, if you will, train the AI or give the AI prompts. What we've done, and if you have a better idea, I'd love to hear it. But what we started to do is we use Outlook for contacts. So I have a series of fake entries in Outlook that I added. AI prompts is what we call it. So what I do is and we just started doing this. So if we're going to, a very common application we use of AI is what we just discussed, is taking the transcript from a meeting and having AI turn it into a memo instead of me taking notes, which by the way is a wonderful thing. So you can really focus on your client and concentrate and be engaged with the client instead of thinking about taking notes or having a second person taking notes. And it's much more accurate. I'm going to give you a few examples in a minute. But when we write the prompts for that, I now save them in Outlook, AI prompts meeting memo. So the next time I go back and I want to have AI give us a summary, a memo from a meeting, I copy the prompts right out of our Outlook and paste it into AI. Because AI doesn't seem to be able to remember things from one series of chats to the next series of chats. So we save the prompts. And it also gives us the ability to enhance and refine those prompts for different things. Any thoughts on that, Alan?
No, I mean that's exactly what you can do. I mean, you could feed 10 of your recent letters into AI and ask it to duplicate that tone if you want to have the same tone. Our
But how
instruction,
do you get AI to remember that? I find that every now and then it will say, this chat has reached its limit. You have to go to another chat and start again. And then it doesn't remember all the prompts from the prior chat.
hmm, Well, you just put the prompts in with the transcription.
Right, but that's why I'm saying we've started saving prompts in Outlook so we
Yeah.
don't have to redo them each time. I don't want different people trying from scratch to create the same prompts. If we've already done it and we've got it pretty good, why reinvent it?
Yeah. Yeah. Marty, do you think clients will always be as candid when they know that AI is listening and say, well, I do have a piece of property in India that I've never reported on my tax return. How do you there's certain things they say that you really don't want to have in your
So,
file time. You
well,
just turn off the AI a minute and let's talk about that.
I'd be careful about that because if you're ever deposed, what happened? Oh, you only record certain meetings. Which meetings don't you record, Alan? And what was discussed at that meeting? You were telling the client to commit fraud?
That's
So
why most of the time I'm not having AI listen in on my meetings. Because I do a lot of creditor protection work. So
yeah.
if I say, well, there's a 5% chance you might get sued here, I think I'd set up an asset protection trust. I'm not sure that I want that in the bankruptcy court record when the client goes bankrupt. Or in the divorce, or to have a divorce judge see exactly what the conversation I had with the client was. Says, well, I'm really angry with her. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. This isn't fair. Not sure. So it's, I don't know that we ask the client, do you want AI to record the session in our fee agreement? And for the older clients, I'm not recording it. I just, after the meeting, I take notes the old fashioned way. And after the meeting, I dictate my notes.
So I was smiling because I had a web meeting. I like to record them. I think it's incredibly efficient. And you raise an interesting question. How does the client feel? My experience is that I'm more engaged with the client because I'm not diverting any of my attention or thought to writing notes. I'm focused on the client. And I think it's actually a better meeting. Different lawyers may have different experiences with that, but I'm smiling because I had a meeting a couple days ago. I got a transcript and I have to um, um, have AI turn it into a letter. I just didn't get a chance. The client told me, I don't know how it came up. He dyes his hair. And then he realized he said, make sure that's not in anything. Don't let that be anywhere. He was worried about his hair dye. So yeah, you have to be conscious of it. But these are all interesting issues that I don't think most colleagues are really using this functionality. I think we need to have these conversations about, do you make it a policy that you do it all the time? You only do it if the client's comfortable. How do you defend yourself if you do it 90% of the time and not 10% of the time? What was discussed? These are things that I think we need to start having real conversations about because they're important. And this is like the brave new frontier. But if more people aren't starting to dabble in it to understand what the power of AI is, and it's only going to get dramatically more powerful exponentially, we're not going to be addressing these issues. And I think, it's great to talk about the ethics rules that apply to AI, but unless you drill down to practical applications, it doesn't work. And what we're trying to do here, everyone, because I think it's really the most helpful approach, is we're trying to give you simple little practical applications where you could start integrating AI into what you do today, right now, in practical ways. Let me give a couple other examples, Alan, unless you had further comments.
No, go ahead.
So I'm an old guy. I grew up in the law where we'd have a paper document. I don't know if the younger people even know what that refers to. We'd have a paper document, and I liked highlighters. I used highlighters in college. I used them in law school. I used highlighters when I practiced. I would highlight, and my thing, I would highlight in yellow provisions in the language. I'd add my comments in the margin and highlight those in green so I could see what was the text, what was green. When we went electronic fully and went paperless around 2010, I still like my highlights. So what I do is Microsoft Word can highlight. We use Word. So I highlight text in yellow and then I add my comments in green and I put a hashtag by my comments so I can pound, 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 pound through a document and just get to my comments to review them very quickly. So I tried something a couple of weeks ago. I had reviewed a trust, and I know you can use Estate View and AI to review a trust, but and I got comments, but I like to look at the language myself. I'm still, I look at AI's review to see what it caught that I didn't. And no one should feel insulted. AI will catch something you did not. But what I did is I inputted a trust that I had annotated for a client, and I said to AI, "Can you read highlights in color?" And AI came back and said, "Of course, Marty, I can do that." Not quite the language it used. So I said, "Do me a favor," not the language I used. I said, "Write me a memo to the client. The yellow highlights are language from the trust document, which you should quote as relevant. And my comments in green are my analysis of those trust provisions. Write a memo about my analysis of those provisions in the trust." Bam, like that, I got back a memo. There's no highlights, there's no nothing. It organized it, it put captions in, it made full sentences out of my stuff. It was really remarkable. So AI, if you think about things it may do to make you, and it's not just efficiency, it's not just saving administrative time on writing a letter, it's saving lawyer time. But, and you've said this several times, Alan, it helps us, when properly used, practice much better.
Right. And then you could have gone further and saved secretarial time by saying, now redraft the document, taking my comments into account, and write a letter to the lawyer for the other party explaining my comments. Then you can look at that and have more thoughts. So
So
you can brainstorm with AI, right?
it's interesting, yes.
You and I, we don't practice alone, and we brainstorm with each other a lot. I brainstorm with my partners. You brainstorm with your fantastic partner, Tom. But you can also brainstorm with AI.
Yes.
I think we've kind of forgotten to say that. It's very effective. It's smart as heck.
You just have to be careful because it's a learning curve. Let me go back to something you said that was really important a minute ago. Alan was talking about how you can record a meeting or a conversation and have AI summarize it and do all this great stuff. What he said was he will say on the meeting with the client that's being recorded, "Hey, AI, research whether or not this provision in fact makes the trust a grantor trust. Give me citations and an analysis of that in the meeting memo that you do." And it'll do the research. Yeah, you better check. That's something you want to check because now it's getting very technical and you're not sure where AI is necessarily drawing from. But the broader point of what Alan was making, how we communicate during the meetings we're transcribing is critical to the quality of the output. So everybody hears about the phrase of training the AI. We have to train us. That's another part of it. The first few times I tried recording meetings with AI and having a transcript done, the transcripts were not good. The memos that came out were not good, and I was not satisfied. And I, in fact, had a discussion with my partner, and we went back to just taking our notes the way we traditionally had done. Then what happened is I learned to train me, not just the AI. And I would do things like be more conscious of not talking at the same time as someone else because that is going to get muddled in any transcription. When an important point is made, I said, "That's a great point, client." And then I'd summarize it. So the AI, by seeing it twice and hearing a summary and great point, knows it's an important point to pick up. Clients aren't even aware I'm doing it, but you get a much better output.
Marty, have you thought about saying, the meeting's kind of over. Let's take a bathroom break and ask AI what else I should be asking you and what else we should have discussed. And
That's
then,
interesting.
hi, based on what we've done so far, what have I missed? Now, there's already AI in the medical field that prompts the doctor during the talk. While the doctor is with the patient, the AI is listening and watching. And then the AI says, ask her about this, ask her about that. Have you considered that this medicine is indicated for these combination of situations? And the doctors I've talked to about this are very happy with it. So, I mean, that's coming. That's on
I
its.
don't know how to do that today because if I record and upload a transcript, it's not in real time. But that's an interesting prompt I haven't done. I'm going to do all the time now. Is there anything else that we should have discussed pertinent to this conversation? Why not?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think this whole monthly magazine may be about practical applications of AI people can use today. I didn't think that's what we were going to do, but it's almost becoming that. So let me tell you another one that I had that was interesting. Different application. So I did a meeting transcript, and I was really getting worried about the client's capacity because they said a couple of times in the meeting things like, I'm really tired, I can't focus, or I'll have to think about that. And this is after months and months and months of going through this stuff. But I wasn't sure how pronounced or how many times or how significant these issues were. So when I had AI write the summary, the meeting, a memo of the meeting from a transcript, I said, I'm getting concerned about this client's capacity. Can you highlight? And actually, because I don't want to offend the client, but I don't want the other advisors to get upset, like, why are you bringing this up now? But I've never had a meeting with this client that I detected some of these issues. I said, I'd like you to also, give me comments and thoughts on the client's capacity, and in particular, any statements the client made, because we have the transcript, that might suggest a problem. I would like you to put them in quotes. So I have a listing of all the different issues that may have been raised in the meeting. There's no way I could, while even if taking copious notes, could have picked up the exact language the client used, or the tone of her voice, or how many instances came up. When I got the summary of this meeting back, AI identified 13 in an hour-long meeting, 13 comments that were made by the woman, the client, that were worrisome from a capacity standpoint. When I read the actual quotes of all 13 of these condensed, listed, I have to take a very different approach with this client. I'm very concerned. I would not have been able to evaluate or pick that up on my own. Not possible. And by the way, the transcript, you see them, Alan, they could be like, for an hour long meeting, it could be 150 pages. I mean, can you imagine having an admin go through that and identify it? It would be days of project. And nobody would spend the time to do it. AI did it like that. So it gave me an insight and the support in case somebody wants to argue with me. This is why I have to take a new tack.
Yeah, it's darn smart. Now, where did you go from there? Did you recommend a mental health counselor for an evaluation, or are you just going to be more careful with this particular client? What's your solution?
There's other factors that concern me in terms of the dispositive plan and what it means. If somebody's leaving everything to a long-term spouse and then to their two natural kids, you're less worried. When they're leaving and I hate the phrase, but a not a natural order of distribution, or whatever the phrase is that we tend to use. Obviously, the capacity issue is more worrisome, and that's the case here. So I want to see a mental I want to see a geriatric psychiatrist or neurologist do an evaluation. I need to know what types of medication she's on and if they affect her. I need to revisit with her the dispositive plan and make sure she really understands it, because now I'm concerned. And the other thing that I'm concerned about, which AI helped me do, is I I'm concerned about the inconsistencies in how the planning decisions have evolved. So with AI's help, but it couldn't do it all, so I had to do some of it more manually, like we traditionally work. I identified and I asked AI to start it, so I had a good starting point. I said, for each person in the dispositive plan, summarize how the plan to them, the bequests to them have changed over time. I also said, because we'd gone through this, and this may be unique kind of to this client, but I said, for every asset on her balance sheet, because there's only like five, I said, explain how the disposition of that asset has changed over time. So I got a summary showing all the different changes. And in the letter, which hasn't gone out yet, I told the client, I need to understand, and you need to explain to me, if I'm going to continue, why you've changed several times dispositions to each person and to each asset. I don't care what she says if it gives me some plausible explanation, but I'm worried that my file showing all these different changes, some of which I wasn't even aware of until I had AI review all the documents, suggest and maybe support the competency issue. So AI helped me really identify these issues, is helping document it for the client. The client's not going to be happy, but these are things you said, ma'am. I can't, what can I do? But that to me is helping me practice at a better level because what I thought I was hearing or getting a feel for is now quantified in 13 different points, quotes from her. What I was concerned about with we've been struggling to um, get the dispositive plan specific and finalized, and I kind of felt like it kept it was a moving target. But now that I see for every asset and every person how everything has changed so many times, it's really a worrisome picture. I don't think I would have identified the picture without the help of AI to this degree.
Pretty neat. Yeah, it's really good with math too. My gosh, is it good with math? I have not found a hallucination in the math world. It
Well,
lay
look
out.
at the example with the time run analyzing a bill. That
Yeah,
used to take hours of admin time, and it would even take hours of my time because I'd have to go through and manually code everything. It read the time entries and made decisions about how to allocate. And listen, if it put, $500 more, $1,000 more to the gift tax return review versus the other work we did, so what? But the point was it was plausible, it was detailed, it was analytic, and it was like that. I got one more that I thought of for today. So one of the things that I always hated doing, and I would either relegate it to an admin because I didn't want to do it, but a lot of times they couldn't do it. I'd have to get involved, and I don't know why people do this. No one get offended, please. But so often, and I know you have this happen when you lecture, you get back from the organization you're lecturing for. Thanks for sending the PowerPoint. We need a timed agenda and 5 learning points for purposes of applying for CLE. I No offense to anyone in the CLE world, I just hate doing that. It's just such a waste of time. And honestly, if you got a 50-page PowerPoint, Alan doesn't believe in doing any PowerPoints less than 150 pages, but that's Alan. But if you have a 50 or 100-page PowerPoint, it takes a lot of time to do a timed agenda. And I don't know what that really adds to why they're giving credit or not giving credit, but it's part of the requirement, so you have to do it. So I don't know, maybe some number of weeks ago, I said, can AI do this instead of me having somebody do it? So I uploaded my PowerPoint and I said, give me a timed agenda. And by the way, one of the things that makes this hard, Alan, you may give a talk on a specific topic, grant or trust, but one group wants an hour presentation, another group wants a 3 hour presentation. Sorry about that. So um, um, you need a different timed agenda for the different amount of time, right? And some groups for CPAs want 50-minute CPE, so you want a 50-minute timed agenda. You got to rethink all this stuff. Just tell AI, I need a 3 hour timed agenda and 5 learning points. And then after that, give me a 2 hour timed agenda for a different presentation with 4 learning points. Bam, you get it like that fast. And what I've done is I copy paste it, put it in the email back to the organization, like within a minute, send it to them, I'm done.
yeah. And you can also tell them the description to put in their brochure. It can run that for you too.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to do that for this program. I'm going to have a transcript done and I'll have AI write, which I've done that before for the descriptions for programs. I take the transcript of a webinar and I have AI generate the first draft of materials. I actually did that for our first monthly presentation that played the first couple of days of February, our January monthly magazine. That's how I
Well,
generated it. So using AI to generate timed agendas and learning points, and as you point out, yes, and I've done that. The first draft of an advertisement for a webinar. And you know what I actually like about using AI to generate the first draft of an advertisement? I like the language it uses better than my language. I kind of like tend to be very boring and technical, maybe very boring and very technical. I like the tone of AI for advertising. I don't like it for certain legal matters, but for something from a marketing standpoint, its language is like just it's good. I like it. So that's another application. Um, Ellen, I'm not quite sure. Uh, do you have another 10 minutes? Let's talk about Will contracts or some other things?
18, 19 minutes, sure.
Okay. You have a very different perspective than most people I know, than anyone I know, about will contracts. I always get concerned with will contracts because do I need somebody different to represent each spouse? What are we putting in it? Does the fact they're pursuing a will contract um, in any way raise a concern about their comfort or trust for each other? So I get a little concerned with them and what they'll actually accomplish. I do mention them to every client because, if one spouse dies prematurely and the new spouse remarries somebody a third their age, they don't want the assets going to the new spouse. They want the assets going to the kids from the marriage. And I think that both spouses are usually in agreement on that. Now, obviously, one of the ways that we protect that stuff is by having everything go in trust on the first death for the surviving spouse. So that covers part of it. But you have a somewhat different perspective on it. Maybe you can explain what you do and why you do it and how you apply it.
Yeah, well, it's client centric. I sit down with a married couple and I say, if one of you dies, here's what goes to the surviving spouse, IRA, rollovers, whatever it may be. And do you want the surviving spouse to be able to give all of that to the next spouse and the children of the next spouse? They just look at me in amazement. And normally the female spouse, if there's a male spouse, the female spouse normally says, "No, I don't want that to happen. It happened to a couple of friends of mine already. It happened to my aunt. It happened to my father. Are you telling me that in this estate plan, everything is not locked and loaded for our children only?" No, it isn't. Would you like to have an agreement between the two of you that says that if one of you dies, at least 90% or 85% or 75% of the net worth of the assets existing and life insurance proceeds on the death of the first dying spouse have to be held irrevocably for the surviving spouse and descendants? They both nod.
Not affirmative.
They nod affirmative. Now, I have to advise them, and I do in the agreement and by a letter, that you can both get separate lawyers to make sure this is what you want to do, to make sure it's going to be enforceable. It would be better for you to get separate lawyers. But they basically say, "What do you mean? We're on the same page. This is to protect our children. This is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It's not in favor of one spouse or the other. Maybe it's in favor of the female spouse because that's the spouse that's usually more concerned about what the male will do if the male dies first. That's
If the female dies first, you mean?
the female dies first. But it's not a complicated agreement. In Florida, it requires disclosure of assets, and that we're doing a lot of them. And the other part of it, Marty, is it's really good creditor protection planning. Because the way I write it is that the surviving spouse, as to any assets that can be transferred to an asset protection trust,
So you leave out IRAs.
we leave out IRAs. But for example, with Marcia and I, if Marcia were to die first, whatever's not in the credit shelter trust that she leaves me, which could be our home, could be our joint accounts, could be the office building, I would have to, within 90 days, set up an asset protection trust, put those assets in there. And it's great that I have a contractual obligation to establish an asset protection trust because if there's some claim out there against me, I've not set this up for the purpose of avoiding creditor under the Voidable Transfer Act. I've set it up because I'm contractually required to set it up.
It's
And
actually interesting because that's probably done years and years and years in advance in most cases, so that it's not like you just did this on the cusp of getting sued by somebody. You had this obligation pre-existing by years.
that's right.
And in that CES 2007 Delaware case that upheld the self-settled trust, the court was very positively noting that trust and the initial transfers were done 7 years before the um, business investment endeavor that led to the claim even arose. So if you do something like this years before a claim arises, I think it seems like it would have some great strength to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Do
And
you
remarriage, the remarriage rate is very high, and the estrangement rate is very high too. Much higher than laymen realize how often the new spouse just doesn't get along with the kids of the first marriage, especially when the new spouse has children.
especially when the new spouse is younger than the kids from the prior marriage?
Right. That too.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on that in a second, but let me ask you a few questions. How detailed do you get about what that asset protection trust has to have in it? Do you specify that it's got to be an adapt jurisdiction?
It has to be an adapt jurisdiction. Sometimes I specify the jurisdiction. It has to be substantially similar to the credit shelter trust. With some clients, I have attached the asset protection trust that will be signed at the time.
That sounds like very clear.
That's the safest approach.
And what do you put in this will contract? Just that, like you said, 75% of non-retirement of assets that can be transferred, such as, by way of example, not retirement assets, will be transferred to this trust.
That's right.
But
That's
you
right.
almost have to have it has to be clear that almost, or it's almost a certainty that the surviving spouse will need access to those assets because let's just have the husband die first to keep it simple. If the husband dies and assets go into a Q-tip, or maybe we'll have a disclaimer credit shelter trust in case they're in a state like New York with a lower exemption amount. But let's say they all go into a Q-tip. So the surviving spouse is getting all the income, plus there may be principal invasion, perhaps with a independent trustee if they're concerned, although many people don't want to do that on a Q-tip. And then so a large swath of the assets are already in protective trusts for the survivor where they're protected, but they have certain access depending on the type of trust and trustee and so on, or they could be their own trustee with a HEM standard, but that kind of may not be the protection you want if there's a remarriage. So you're then going to take the surviving, let's say, wife in this hypothetical, and she's going to have to transfer most of her non-retirement assets that were not held by the husband that went into his trust into this DAPT.
That's right. Domestic Asset Protection Trust. And she can choose a trustee in that jurisdiction. It would typically have to be a trust company. And then she could also choose one or more of her children or whoever else is permitted in the agreement. So the agreement says you have to have a co-trustee. At least one trustee has to be a trust company in the domestic asset protection trust jurisdiction to make sure everything's done right. But any one or more of our children, or Harry Smith, our best friend, or Doris Day, our lawyer, could also be trustees. You pick one or more of them, and you can replace with one or more of them. You have control subject to your fiduciary standard. You can use the money to maintain the standard of living that we've had, to buy nursing home services, things like that. But there has to be a trust company watching. So if you do remarry and you have an aggressive spouse, or someday you have a housekeeper who's going to be signing your name on things, they're
We've
not
seen that.
into this asset protection trust. It's going to protect you from the housekeeper, from all these things when you get dementia or whatever might happen to you.
How long are these contracts? They sound like it's getting pretty complicated.
8 or 9, 10 pages. It's right. It's very specific, but it doesn't have to be that long.
And you have these witnessed and notarized
Yes.
with the same formality of a will.
Yes, and at the same time, although that's not necessary, but at the same time, attached is a very clear summary of their assets and liabilities. So there's full disclosure as to what it's going to apply to, and both spouses know what those assets are.
In a lot of cases, I would think that if, let's say, and let's just keep killing the husband first for simplicity's sake, if the husband's assets, let's say, all go into a Q-tip for the wife, and his IRA is rolled over, the wife, let's say, and let's say the half of the house even went into the Q-tip. The wife's assets may consist of a half a house and her own IRAs. You may not have enough assets to really justify the asset protection trust. Do you address like a de minimis rule or anything, or how do you deal with that?
I haven't, but the children are the third party beneficiaries of the trust, so they could amend it if they want to.
By agreement.
Yeah. Now I also have another agreement.
Let me interject, Alan, but they're not necessarily only amending the trust, they're kind of amending the agreement the parents made. How is that possible?
Well, I'll have to check and see if I have a provision in there that allows it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that would make sense, especially if there's not enough assets just because of the nature of the assets.
Right. Right.
Do you reference this agreement in the existing wills or rev trusts?
I don't. I don't. Maybe I should, but I don't.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I could see pros and cons either way.
Another thing I've done before, and after telling the clients of any of the risk, is I have an agreement that says when my spouse dies, I will hold my IRA as if it was a trust. I will invest it with the consent of our children or the consent of a investment advisor, and I will only use it for myself. And if I pull anything more than I need for health education and maintenance, it will go into something equivalent to the credit shelter trust. So basically, you agree not to give your IRA to your next spouse. Now, whether that disqualifies the IRA, I don't think it does. But that's another thing to consider because a lot of times you're representing people who have a $3 million IRA and a $600,000 house, and that's it.
But wouldn't you would you not in this will contract, and it's really more than a will contract. It's really a much broader agreement than just a will contract, because a will contract is just I'm not going to change my will. And with all the different ways we own assets so commonly now, saying I'm not going to change my will doesn't go far enough at all.
Right,
So it's really not a will contract. It's really an agreement about disposition and handling of all assets.
right. That's
Why
right.
not just provide that you can't remove the children as beneficiaries of the retirement plan? You can name the children or trust for the children, but you can't name a new spouse, even being specific. What about a thought like that in this agreement you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, then the new spouse may just induce them to take all the money out, pay the taxes, and give the new spouse what's left.
But so you provide that that can't be done in this.
That's right. I mean, it's a good idea to say I won't change the beneficiary, but that's not going to prevent an
It's
aggressive.
not enough. You're right, because you can pull the thing out. You didn't change the beneficiary, but I took all the money out, paid the tax, and gave it to my new.
Right, right. And I had the son of the new spouse handle the investments and bought high cost, high commission garbage
Annuities.
annuities. Right.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody yesterday who had, as a financial advisor, and he had a client just come in where something like 80% of her wealth was put in annuities by some prior advisor.
I see that.
Yeah, you got to be careful. It's bad. It's remarkable that people still do such egregious things.
Yeah,
Let
yeah.
me let me stay on this topic, but change gears slightly to comment on a point you made about the rate of divorce and the rate of estrangement and things like that. I'm not going to comment on estrangement because I didn't look at it, but we know that the average, if you will, rate of divorce is something like 45% in the country. That sound right?
Sounds right.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people talk about that, but I don't think that's the right perspective. And this is important as to the kind of planning you're talking about. So first, there was a book I read I think more than a decade ago, and I don't even know how I remember it, but Charles Murray, I think it was called Coming Apart. It was sort of a sociological analysis and view of America. Do you recall reading that?
Yeah,
Fascinating book. He
yeah.
talked about what he called, if I remember memory is correct, super zip codes. There's a certain very limited number of zip codes, Beverly Hills, New York City, Dallas, et cetera, where you have very, very wealthy, very educated people. And he talked about how those very wealthy, very educated people have their kids go to, elite schools. So they're getting prepped to be the next generation of elites. and they usually intermarry with each other. So you have one wealthy, educated elite marrying another wealthy, educated elite, and it perpetuates the wealth concentration and power concentration and so on. And if I have it wrong, forgive me, everybody. But he made a comment that in that cohort, that demographic cohort, the rate of divorce was dramatically lower than for the population as a whole. And I remembered reading that, and there was a recent conference, it doesn't matter which, where people were talking about this 45% divorce rate and raising it in the context of what kind of planning we can or can't or should or shouldn't, is maybe a better phrase, do for married couples because of the risk of divorce. And I remembered that book, and I went back and I started doing some research all on AI. I haven't verified it, but I asked AI to find statistical data correlating the rate of divorce with the rate of wealth, the wealth level of the client. I asked AI to find statistical data on educational levels and the rate of divorce. On both of those factors, and I'll come to a third in a minute, on both of those factors, there's a very substantial correlation. If you've graduated from college, your rate of divorce is substantially lower than someone who hasn't gotten out of high school. If you have a higher wealth level, and it actually was shocking to me at what low levels of wealth the correlation occurs where wealth reduces the likelihood of divorce dramatically. And I think some of the numbers were as low as if you have a house and a car and 40 grand in the bank, your rate of divorce plummets. And it kind of makes sense because, and I remember just seeing this, the garbage that comes over the internet, the top 10 reasons people get divorced, but always near the top is financial stress. So if you have a meaningful sum of wealth, the financial stress that often leads to divorce is not there. And then I asked it to correlate, and this was just my guess, is there any correlation between duration of marriage and divorce? Because it seemed to me, and I was just guessing, but the data that AI found, I haven't reviewed. I don't have the actuarial knowledge or statistical background to really do it. That the once a marriage is over a certain number of years, the rate of divorce gets lower. Now, that doesn't factor in, which AI told me, which makes sense, gray divorce, which has been growing to a degree. But I then gave a hypothetical. If I have a couple that's married for 20 years, because the longer the marriage, the lower the rate of divorce, both are college educated, and they have 5 million in the bank, which for a lot of estate planners watching this, 5 million is maybe well below even the threshold of clients they'll take. Even for a lot of estate planners, most of their clients may be in that wealth range or above. It came back, and again, I didn't corroborate this, and it sounds like a little like a Venn diagram, like they didn't quite get the math right. And actually, I asked AI, did he get the math wrong? And it was like testy with me. But it said that the divorce rate was more like 10%, not 45%.
I agree that that's pretty much my experience. And especially if they've been married 20, 30 years, they don't have that stress. If they were going to get divorced, they would have gotten divorced already. That
That doesn't mean that we can ignore it in planning, but it does mean that I think we have a different weighing, and we shouldn't be doing the weighing, the client should. So if you present the will contract concept, right, the client can say no.
well,
If you,
well, well, my agreement though says if you get divorced, this contract's null and void.
that makes sense.
If you file a petition for divorce, this contract is null and void. It's just if one of us survives the other while we're married. But no, I agree with you. When we have more time, we should go in.
Let's do that the next monthly because we
Yeah,
were actually going to do it this monthly and we got too involved in AI. But I think the typical clients of an estate planner are a unique demographic, not just in terms of divorce, but in terms of health, longevity, and a lot of things, right?
yeah,
There's strong correlations between wealth and education and longevity because wealthy, educated people tend to consume medical care better and follow the doctor's directives better.
that's right.
Alan, we've covered a lot of stuff. We covered a lot more AI than I thought, but I'm just very excited on the amazing things that AI is enabling us to do. And I hope that a bunch of the things we talked about, I think, save administrative time, but I think fundamentally a lot of these things help us practice better, not just save administrative time.
And make it more enjoyable as well.
It, I, listen, just the case study I told you about capacity, it's fascinating how AI can find these things. I'll give one last example because I know we're out of time. I'm an expert witness on a divorce case, and I was asking AI to find, analyze all these reams of documents. And one of the things that came back that I didn't even ask it to do and said, hey, by the way, did you know that the percentage ownership in the family LLC is listed differently in three different places that is different percentages? I mean, there was so much data, I didn't even realize that. I was looking at some other issues, but isn't it interesting to find that I got inconsistencies between all the underlying legal documents, which is going to help the case?
Everything we do has inconsistencies. That's just a fact of life. But
Yeah.
AI will help spot that. Well, Marty, thank you so much. Really appreciate the
Thank
opportunity.
you, Alan, and we'll try again next month.
All right. Take care.
Anyone that has questions, thoughts, comments, please email one of us. We'll be happy to address your points or even have you on and talk with you.
Absolutely.
Take care, everybody.